Welcome to this Big Rethink Interview. I'm Bryan Alexander, the interviewer, and over to you, Lene Whitley-Putz. You are?
My name is Lene Whitley-Putz, and I am the Dean of Online Learning for Foothill College in Northern California.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. And Chandrika?
Hi, this is Chandrika Khera. I'm in Boca Raton, Florida, and I'm an instructional designer.
Fantastic. Well, we have a whole set of questions that have been built up by everybody in the program, students, faculty, and staff. And we've been asking the same set of questions to everybody. And they start off at a kind of big picture, and then they get to an even bigger picture, then they zoom down. And depending on how the conversation goes, we might at the end have a bonus question, depending. Some of the questions bump up against each other, and so your answers may anticipate later questions. So I'll track that and make sure that it goes. To begin with, let's just ask a kind of intro survey question. What are you seeing in higher education right now as it responds to both COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter? How are you seeing the landscape respond?
So, from the lens of what we're doing at Foothill College, um, we were the first county in California to have a shelter in place. And so we had to move very, very quickly. And what I saw was just a ton of professional development. And it was not only the administration behind that professional development, but also faculty and staff really jumping on board quickly to learn some technology tools that they had maybe been using a tiny bit, but all of a sudden became an important part of their life, like
Mm-hmm.
Zoom and our course management system, Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for us, um, have been working on an equity plan at our campus for about a year and a half now. And so it was an update of our equity plan and really focusing on our online students and looking at the disproportionate impact for students of color in our online program. And all of a sudden, all of our students were online. And so the professional development we were doing to um, kind of approach the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, just merged with the work that we were doing to understand disproportionate impact for our students. And those two pieces came together and have been just running parallel to each other. So for instance, we have a professional development group on campus. That's where we do most of our equity training, but we do equity training in online learning specific to the online environment. And over the past 4 months, we've been working in tandem. So every training that we do in tandem with one another. We had also been working on uh, what we're calling an equity affirmation that was about the, the gap and the disproportionate impact on students of color in our online courses. And we fast tracked that in order to have a cogent response and to really make sure that the students who are being most impacted on a personal basis by COVID-19 and by taking online courses, that we're addressing the places where there's an intersection there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, what we worried about, and I think what we see across the nation now as more results are coming in, is that our students of color are more impacted by health disparities as well. And so now all of a sudden, the amount of things that our students are being asked to face, either personally or because of familial um, situations, are greater than what middle class or um, wealthy people are being asked to face, or white um, people. So we really want to make sure that we are understanding and addressing those. So it's really kind of a merger of these two, and in I mean it's a crisis, but
Yeah.
it's a watershed moment as well.
Ah, ah. Okay, we're going to come back to that watershed moment. That's a, and I'm Thank you for sharing that that tandem development, which is really fascinating. The professional development along with
Right.
your equity plan. On a kind of quantitative level, um, in doing this work, both at Foothill and also as you look out at the broader landscape, which metrics are you tracking, or which trends?
So we've done a variety of different things. We're on the quarter system. And
Mm,
so our shelter in place happened in the last 2 weeks of our winter quarter
mhm,
and drastically then impacted our spring quarter. So,
mm,
of course, we're looking at enrollment. We don't yet have the numbers from our institutional research, but we're looking at whether or not we lost or gained students from disproportionately impacted groups and whether or not there's success in those courses was impacted as well. So we will be looking at the overall retention rate and then also the success rate in classes to compare between fall, winter, and spring, and then also between, because we do have kind of trends in our quarters anyway, between 2019-20 and 2018-2019 to see if there's any
mm, mm,
um, trends that show a quantitative difference.
mm,
We're also trying to better understand what we're in the heart of the Silicon Valley,
mm.
and that doesn't mean all of our students are wealthy. As a matter of fact, it
Yeah.
means that sometimes our students who need more financial support can be invisible. And so we're looking at whether or not students had um, enough equipment, whether or not they had access to the internet. Um, we're tracking whether or not students are using their phones or a tablet device or have access to a laptop. We're trying to ascertain whether or not our students are sharing computers at home and if that is impacting them. But that data is actually much more difficult to get at a community college level than it might be at, say,
Mm.
Georgetown. And so all of those pieces are things that we're trying to track to better understand the impact on our students.
Those are solid metrics that really make a huge difference, and it can be very descriptive. Um, well, this is the present, talking about this annus mirabilis or annus horribilis of 2020. Um, let's broaden our view a little bit and let's look ahead. Um, what do you think some of the longer term changes will be, either to Foothill or to higher education as a whole? And when we look beyond 2020, what kind of post 2020 changes should we anticipate?
So that is a really good question. I was recently contacted by a researcher from one of our UCs. We have a three-tier system here in California. We have the community college system, our CSU system, and then the UC system. And the UC instructor was interested in doing some research to find out how community colleges are um, addressing the current needs and how they're
Mm,
training their faculty.
mm,
And I haven't yet spoken to her, but in my reply, I was kind of abrupt. And one of the things that I said is that at the community college level, we've been aggressively training our faculty on not only using our course management system, but designing online courses because we don't have the ratio of instructional designers to instructors that a research institution has. And so more of our faculty are deeply trained uh, than at a UC or a CSU in the state of California. That said, not all of them are. And so I think one of the lasting trends is that there will be more professional development for faculty, that it will become a piece of the professional development landscape from here on out. That technology is not an add-on that people can use to augment their work in their classroom. It's going to be a necessary part of learning how to use the classroom. And so I
mm.
think that the course management system is going to become a much more important piece of how we imagine our courses and what we imagine for a disaster plan. we've been trying to teach people for years that their syllabus should include a disaster plan. If they're using technology, that that they need to have something in their syllabus that says, you know, in case of disaster, this is what we're going to do. And now all of a sudden people are like, wow, you know, we should all have a disaster plan. And, you know, I think that that's true.
It's a
Between the
good idea.
fires in California over the last several years and then this, I think that that's just going to be part of our planning and part of our professional development.
This is a great question. Chandrika, have you seen any any syllabi lately that have disaster plans built in?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, me either. So I'm just noting this down, and I'm going to email a few colleagues and say, hey, we've got to learn this from Foothill. Um,
Yeah.
I have to
speaking
give credit to Pat James. She actually, when she was a dean at Mount San Jacinto College in Southern California, they installed a new server and the air conditioning in the new building went out and
oh,
their server crashed. And
oh,
so they had a tough week as they were getting back up to speed. And so I think, you know, having alternatives and being clear to your students about what would happen in case of an emergency is really important. Having alternate ways for your students to reach you. We use Pronto. Um, we love that tool, but you know, remind me, anything like that. People need to know and understand those tools, and I think we haven't done enough um, as a department yet to really kind of do training on tools like that that live outside of the course management system, outside of the campus. Um, our campus still primarily communicates with students via email. And we found we don't provide email addresses to students, so they use their own personal email address. And we found during this crisis that was not a good way to communicate with a lot of students. And so I think, you know, as an industry, we need to think more about free or low cost tools that can support communication that are platform agnostic.
well, that's interesting. That's another takeaway to think about for long-term changes in the institution. I mean, from 2020, you know, you know, all the limitations of our communication, we need to improve that. Chandrika, you had a great question about long-term change in terms of business models and online learning. Do you want to float this question?
Yeah, sure. So, one question I have is about this, given federal government stance about immigration, especially about students. So, do you see any short-term and long-term impacts in enrollment? And will it change, will it affect the business model of higher education institutes?
So, yes, as far as the business model is concerned, I'm just peripherally involved with that. We actually have a sister campus, and our international program is at the district level. And so we do have international department at each campus, but they report to the district. But we have been working with them nonstop since late February to help provide support for them and to move a lot of their on-campus support systems online, because they were barred from having very much of an online presence. We really just had not put a lot of effort into that. And as their students were either required to go home or chose to go home, we needed to really quickly get some support up and running for them. So we dedicated an instructional designer to several weeks worth of work to actually get rudimentary support up for their students so that they could communicate and do some work via Canvas. Not their coursework, I'm talking about support of the department, right? And so, I mean, the way that this department counsels the international students, the way that they help them with financial aid and many, many other aspects of
Mhm.
their life as a student.
Mhm.
And so we were able to get some things up and running for them. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's impacting us. We feel like we're, kind of a boat tossed at sea right now with our current administration not having clear guidelines for international students
Mhm.
and vacillating back and
Yeah.
forth between what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed,
Mhm.
often without any care or concern for the health of the college, the financial
Mhm.
health of the college, or the human cost to the students and their families.
Yeah.
And so we're very concerned about that. We're
Mhm.
very concerned about supporting students who've made friends here, who have um, developed mentorship relationships here.
Mhm.
Extremely concerned about those students as we move forward, and
Mhm.
um, not not sure at all about how we'll be able to move forward. And since we're entering, a fall of unrest as well, we have
Mhm.
no idea what will happen with the election and how that will impact our international students. So we're
Uh,
very much feeling like the ground is quicksand, and
Yeah.
not sure where to take our next step.
Yeah. Thank you.
well, thank you indeed. That's a great question, Shwetrika. See, I'm just
Thank
looking
you.
forward to having more of her in my classes because these good questions. Uh, yeah, I guess this is the biggest question that we can ask you then, which is, I mean, we're talking at a macro level now, right? Thinking about higher education as a whole ecosystem. What kind of intersections do you see with what we're doing now, responding to COVID and responding to Black Lives Matter? And how do those intersect with some of the other huge trends like um, climate change or like income inequality?
Yeah, so that watershed piece that we had talked about earlier,
Mhm.
um, I mean, we have always tried to be involved in ongoing professional development. Um, I have engaged in national professional development, encouraged my staff to engage, but the last few months, the level of engagement has risen exponentially. And I hope that we're able to sustain it, but we've also seen like more willingness to support part-time faculty in professional development.
Really?
Yes, we are currently
Oh,
providing stipends this summer for part-time faculty to engage in 6 learning communities that we're offering on campus. It's the first time that I know of that
yeah.
we've had part-time faculty um, being offered a stipend in order to engage. And it's still not enough, but at least it's something, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I see us engaging in that professional development not only locally but nationally, and that we're sharing a lot of information. We just we had an internal um, professional development week that was focused around accessibility because it's National Disability Month, and we decided to put it on YouTube instead of our internal. We use Canvas Studio, and so we put it on YouTube instead, and it has 1,500 views already. And so, like, we made a purposeful decision to say we developed this professional development. Let's just go ahead and put it out there. It's been up for a week and it has 1,500 views. So, we're engaging in that national discussion. We are going to professional development, both across the state and on a national level. We're trying to go in teams. Um, we're bringing that conversation back to the campus. We're engaged in it on multiple levels. We're currently having a meeting every single morning with our president, a campus-wide meeting. Anyone can Zoom in, so we have 30 minutes to discuss what's on our plate. And so I think that the dialogue has just changed. The way that we dialogue has changed, and the desire to work with other people and to share with other people has changed. We've learned so much. We were in the process of developing a student support portal. Our goal was to have 5 campus resources on this portal so that online students would have access to the library, to counseling, to psychological services. I can't even remember what the other 2 were, but when we started sheltering in place, we recognized our students wouldn't have access to any of the campus services. And so we quickly reached out to all of the services and developed a portal that houses all of the students' ability, and it's right in Canvas. So if they're in Canvas, they click the button and they have access to every student service on campus. And we shared that statewide, and about 5 campuses have already taken us up on that, used our template to create their own student portal. And I didn't get any pushback from administration about whether or not our instructional designers should spend time helping another campus integrate that.
Wow. Well, that would be really interesting to see if that kind of, if I can be cartoonish for a moment, to have those silos kind of open up.
Yeah.
I mean, if this is an emergency state, that it is encouraging everyone to participate more globally. I'm thinking about challenges to the climate. Thank you. That's a really, really good answer. Well, then again, we have somehow hit 28 minutes of our hour, which is crazy, and we have more to talk about. And this is a related question. This is like almost a Freudian question here. These 2 big crises or developments that we're going through right now, again, COVID-19 and anti-racist mobilization, what have they revealed about higher education? I mean, what facets of higher education that have not really been talked about or thought about widely are now out in the open that were once hidden?
Well, let's go back to that equity affirmation that we've been working on. We sent an early draft out to our friends in the state, and the feedback that we got was like, "Wow, that's aspirational. Like, who's looked at this on campus, and is the campus okay with you publishing this?"
Mm.
And we were like, we're going to go for it. And now people are hungry for it. They're open for it. So, we have explicit statements calling out racism in our curriculum and in the way that we do testing, in the way that we design our course outcomes, in the way that we do professional development, in the way that we support our students in outside services. And we have asked for a close examination of all of that. And I think that there's fertile ground right now. I think people are open to it. It's kind of drawn away the curtains and allowed us to talk about, what would this really look like? So a lot of people want to be an equity-minded instructor, but they still want to teach the course that has been passed down through the official channels of academia. They don't want to examine things like proctored testing, and certainly they don't want to look at things like history textbooks in the United States and how they might have misrepresented genocide and slavery. Look at Tom Cotton's speech yesterday in support of his new bill.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a sense that there is an opening and a possibility for looking at ways that we have historically misrepresented people of color and misrepresented racism in the United States, and now might be the perfect opportunity to remove the blinds and correct some errors. And I hope that that has a lasting impact. We've certainly gotten a lot of really, really positive feedback on the equity affirmation that we are creating, and we've actually released it to the faculty. It's now um, not even close to the document that we had originally started. A lot of people are participating in developing that.
Uh,
And it's almost like, you know, watching an idea that you've got a seed for, you know, go out and someone else takes care of it, and you realize, you know, that you thought that you're planting a little flower and it's a huge tree. So it's been, you know, a really amazing transformational process for us, and you know, filled with no small amount of fear, and because we're asking for huge changes, right? But there seems to be like a desire to make those changes. We'll see. You know, I don't think that I want any more George Floyd incidents to happen. If we could prevent that, that would be amazing. Um, but what happens is the protests become a memory. They become part of 2020. Oh my gosh, the summer of unrest or the summer of COVID.
mhm.
And then institutional change doesn't happen. So, how do we maintain that sense of passion and desire to change when things do settle down a little bit? So that's going to be the key. It's like, can we maintain our desire for change?
Thank you. That's a key question. It's quite a revelation about higher education that we have this capacity. Well, this is the time in the questions where we narrow our focus down a little bit after that big, huge one. And I want to hit a couple of different slices of higher ed. And one slice has to do with the LDT program at Georgetown. Um, a lot of students from LDT either go on to become instructional designers or, like Chandrika, start off as instructional designers. Uh, and it's a fascinating field. And by instructional designer, I mean people who call themselves instructional designers, but also people who do some of that work, like academic technologists, some educational technologists, some librarians, and so forth. In March and April, that group did just heroic efforts to lead higher education online in a hurry. Um, and I'm curious now, looking ahead for instructional designers, what can they contribute to higher education's transformation? What's the role of instructional designers moving forward?
That is such a good question, and I think that you know, if I can just center that at community colleges, um, I taught at a community college level and at the UC level in California for many years, and I developed the first online writing course at the UC that I worked at. And we came in way under budget, and the course was beautiful. I had an instructional designer assigned to work with me, and we had a wonderful collaboration. It was such an amazing experience.
Mm,
And I learned a lot from collaborating with him, but he learned a lot from collaborating with me as well. And one of the things that he said is like, how do you know the
mm,
stuff that you know?
mm.
And I said, well, at the community college level, we don't have an instructional designer that we would be assigned for 6 months to build a
Right.
course. Like, we have to be the instructional designers and the instructors. We have to maintain our own courses. We don't have courses that, you know, are these beautifully designed courses that you know, are kind of like standalone jewels. Our courses at the community college level are constantly, they're dynamic because we're constantly changing them and improving them.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think instructional designers can learn from that model. They can help faculty design courses that are very dynamic and that improve every single time they're taught. Where there's course material that students actually create for the course, and there's course material that the instructor is constantly changing in order to address current events or improve from the last time the course was taught, so that online courses become much more dynamic rather than static. Um, and I think that community colleges need to recognize that having instructional designers on staff, can really help faculty learn more about the craft of teaching online. It's not the same craft as face-to-face teaching, and there's an artistry to it that needs to develop over time, and you develop that in conversation with instructional designers, and that the instructional designers actually stay abreast of ways that we can use technology and ways that we can present um, learning opportunities in an asynchronous environment. And as faculty, we probably weren't ever asked to think about how learning can be better asynchronously. We think of learning as taking place in our classroom and homework as taking place when students go home.
Right.
And it's actually probably the other way around, that the learning is probably taking place at home. But you won't get many faculty that really like lectures to admit that, right? So I think that instructional designers can help us improve our online courses by helping us think through how to scaffold asynchronous learning, and how to really engage with multimedia instruction and do a little bit more segmenting and get students involved with learning a little and then doing a little. I think that that's critical to understanding. And then I think that that rolls into the classroom, because learning in the classroom is probably not any different. And so how can what we're learning about asynchronous learning help our synchronous courses, so that we are providing more kind of segmented work in our classes and giving students more opportunity in our classes. I think the flipped classroom is a perfect example of that. Although I think that flipped has some drawbacks too, because if you're putting an hour lecture and asking your students to watch it before they come to class, chances are they're not learning as much as they could. So I think that there's this fertile ground right now where we're really kind of rethinking how actual learning takes place. And instructional designers have a huge responsibility in that conversation to problematize long-standing traditions that don't necessarily lead to learning, right? So there's long-standing traditions in education about what a classroom looks like and what classroom activity looks like, whether it's an online class or a face-to-face class, and instructional designers can help us start to problematize that and really look at the science of learning and the artistry of learning.
They sound like revolutionaries.
I firmly believe that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I thought that I was a really good teacher, and I probably was a passionate teacher and cared about my students. But when I started teaching online and really started engaging in professional development, and I would say I could have a second career as an instructional designer. I've trained myself in that and done professional development in that. And that's taught me more about teaching than all of the other years of experience. So
wow. Well, that's a good thing. That's a positive story with an upward arc. And if we repeat that story off far enough, we can leaven higher education. Well, let's change focus to another part of higher education, which is science and research. One of the developments of 2020 has been strikingly different responses to science in the American public as a whole. We have people who are either passionately or soberly embracing epidemiology, as well as the findings of social science through, say, critical race theory. We're also finding a great deal of skepticism and indeed opposition to science. The reason I'm asking you about this is this may tell us something about how higher education produces and shares scientific knowledge. I'm curious, what have we learned in 2020 about that process? I mean, what are we doing right in sharing our science and other research, and what do we need to do better in terms of outreach and persuasion?
well, I mean, I think that that's a really hard question. There's so much involved there in politics and in faith, faith in the United States, and the juxtapositioning of certain certain concepts as being, I mean, my personal opinion is that we have created an environment that has pitted groups against each other, and that one group is seen as faith-based and one group is seen as science or research-based. And that's a dangerous situation. And so I think that's a problem. I also think that it's a problem when we have undervalued understanding argument and understanding. So we value people's opinion. Everyone has a right to their opinion. I taught rhetoric for many years, and on the first day of class, I would ask my students to write down like why our personal opinions matter so much, and they would write a little essay on it, and then I would go around the room with a trash can and make them tear it up and throw their opinion in the trash can.
Oh no! Oh no!
And I would say, in this class, we don't talk about opinions, we talk about arguments. And if you want to talk about an argument, you can.
That's brutal. Oh my God.
So
point across. Oh, jeez.
They learned what an argument was by the end. Yeah. And actually there was no drops in that class. None.
Huh.
None.
Huh.
Years of teaching that class, not a single drop. Okay. So they learn what an argument is. They learn how to create an argument and how that differs from having an opinion or a gut sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have not valued that as in a country. And you know, I'm sorry, it's brutal. I don't care about your gut sense. I really don't. It's a good place to start, like a hypothesis, but now show me the data.
Right.
And we've done a couple of things. We need to increase open educational resources. There was just an article that was released by Sage, one of the Sage journals, and I was like, oh, I need that article. I couldn't get to the article because our library no longer pays for that database, and I could not get to the article. Yeah. When we lock our community colleges out because we have so little money compared to UCs and private institutions, and when those UCs and the private institutions are setting the price for journals and our community colleges are locked out, we are locking out not only our students from that information, but our professors and our researchers from that information. And so that has got to change. Higher education and sharing the research in higher education can no longer be monetized. And if we're going to monetize that, then we need to take a close look at ourselves and say, do we really value education? I think that's really important. And then once we do that, then research becomes something different, and our literacy needs to, and I'm not talking basic literacy, I'm talking about the literacy that is involved to decode a message and to understand, to be able to understand a bias in a message, to be able to understand how we are receiving that message. I mean, can we be surprised if Facebook has an impact on our election when we are doing nothing to teach people how to understand how an argument is actually created? And you know, I feel like until we can have that conversation, it's going to be difficult to make lasting change, but it's also going to be difficult to ensure that we're having the same conversation, right? And we need to be skeptical. My entire dissertation is written about being skeptical of medical information and what gets written in medical journals, the bias in medical journals. So I'm not saying that research is infallible, but we need a better language and we need more education around how we actually do that work. And
did you write your dissertation before the replication crisis?
I wrote my dissertation in the late 90s.
Oh, wow. You were ahead of the curve.
And I actually studied obesity journals and the fact that many of the arguments about body mass index
Mm-hmm.
are actually prefaced on studies that were done all on white men of a particular um, social class,
Mm-hmm.
and that long-term studies literally don't exist. And so when they're writing all of this research, they're basing it on really one foundational study that was focused on one specific group, and especially the focus on dieting and is probably not so great for people.
Good for you. And well, this tells us a lot. And this is the first call we've had for more argumentative literacy in these interviews, and I'm so glad to see it. But let's look at another slice of higher ed, and this has to do with the digital divide. Chandrika, do you want to ask this question? You had a really good way of putting this.
Yeah, I'm going to read what I wrote because I won't be able to speak otherwise exactly the way.
Oh, that's okay.
So, so COVID-19 has exacerbated the digital divide between well-to-do and low-income students. So do you see any new digital trends that can help bridge that digital divide? Anything new that is coming up? Any new technology or something? Or even not technology, some other way of addressing that?
I mean, little tiny things. There hasn't been enough time to see whether or not there is a protracted change in the way that we um, actually do the work. I mean, I've seen a lot of campuses that are giving out computers,
Mm-hmm.
and that's good. We bought a bunch of computers, and students could come pick them up, but we had like this much money at first,
Mm-hmm.
and we had no idea, what was coming from the federal government. So we bought Chromebooks, and we only distributed, I think 250 is what we purchased.
Wow.
Um, so I know that's like a drop in the bucket to our students, right? Um, so I think that, a fundamental understanding from campuses that technology is like a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we want our students to have access to the textbooks. And so we want our students to have access to the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a little piece that we saw, I mean, it's kind of silly, but it has made an impact. We've been telling faculty for years to download the Canvas student app and to look at all of their courses from the student app. And I think very few faculty did it. They just kind of went like, yeah, the online learning office is constantly telling us that. I
Mm-hmm.
had so many emails from people saying, how do I download that app? Where can I find that app? And then we've been running Zoom sessions just for, to raise people's awareness about what their courses look like and to offer them little tiny things um, that they can do, because all of the issues seem so big. We like to have a couple that are focused on small things like you can do this today.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been hooking up our phones and sharing our phone screens with people um, just to demonstrate like what the design looks like on a phone
Mm-hmm.
and what you can do with your phone. And I think, well, we've had a ton of people purchase Wacom tablets because of that.
Mm.
And so we've been telling math and science for quite some time that they should use a Wacom tablet. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we bought almost as many Wacom tablets as we did Chromebooks.
Wow.
So that was really, a change, a shift in the way that people do things. Where there was some resistance to trying a new technology tool, all of a sudden now people are like, oh yeah, I should have been doing this. So maybe a trend is in the way that people are thinking about technology in their classroom. Maybe a trend is in how the campus was actually supporting faculty in adopting that. I mean, we were not able to buy new phones for our faculty. We had a bunch of faculty who turned out that their home computers that they were using, they literally could not use Studio, which is the video creation tool in our course management system. And so like they couldn't create a video with their home computer. And so I think we need some lasting changes, like making sure that part-time faculty have working technology.
Yeah, so there is one more question I want to ask, which is kind of related to this. So there is general bias against online learning, and also like you said that people don't want to use computers or phone or technology, just want to do face-to-face learning, go to classroom and learn. So now because of COVID, there is remote learning is happening widely. So do you think the perception about online learning will change now going forward?
We've been asking that every day. It's kind of like how we start our morning. Like, how's this going to affect us long term? I think that there are a group of people. Um, I think there's some online instructors who've really improved their class over the last few months because it's like there's a ton of professional development right now that they can participate in.
Mhm.
So that's good for people who've been teaching online. There's people that maybe had their toe in the water that have had access to professional development and now a desire to put some time and energy into their class, and so their classes are better.
Mhm.
And then there's a group of people that were resistant to teaching with technology
Mhm.
who are being forced in a time of trauma to do something that they didn't want to do. And we all know that when we are in a period of trauma and then we are being required to do something against our will, that our mindset is not optimal. And I think for that group of people, this is incredibly difficult. Um, it just reinforces for them um, how disorienting technology can be.
Mhm.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I told you that technology is not the way to teach, and look, I'm not being successful. And I mean, I can't blame them. I would not want to be required to teach in a whole new environment with no time to develop
Mhm.
the course and no time to develop the skills that I need. I developed my online teaching skills over years,
Mhm.
and people are being asked to develop them over 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And so I think for a large group of people, that this past few months and whatever happens, I mean, all the way through 2021, I mean, we're thinking about next summer already. I think it's going to reinforce for them that
Mhm.
teaching with technology is hard and doesn't and not good. And so I think that that's going to reinforce some boundaries, and
Mhm.
we're going to have to work hard to overcome that. I mean, we are trying really hard right now, like
Mhm.
to overcome that.
Yeah. Mhm. Thank you.
Well, I'm really glad that you're working to overcome that, and thank you for that sketch of where you're headed. Another great question, Chandrika.
Thank you.
Um, we're at the very end of our session, and what we do have a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to ask: is there anything, Lene, that we've touched on that you want to circle back on and emphasize? Or is there another topic that we haven't covered that you think is crucial that we should address?
Um, I mean, I think especially given um, the focus of the work that you're doing, looking at models for leveraging instructional designers is really critical. Our campus was very lucky. I have a vice president and a president who are in support of the work that we're doing right now toward course quality and equity.
Okay.
And so they asked me, we were not even in shelter in place yet. And they said, if we do have to go off campus, what do you need? And I said, 2 more instructional designers immediately. And at least 2 faculty assigned to supporting faculty. So two faculty who are also acting as kind of instructional designers, right? And they found the funding for it. So before we ever even left campus, we had our department was twice the size as it was, and so it's still not big enough. So I think helping campuses learn how they can leverage instructional designers and what that looks like. So like every single course doesn't have to be designed from an instructional designer from beginning to end, but rather that instructional designers can be leveraged in ways to make it more financially feasible for smaller colleges or for community colleges that may not have as much money. Because I think what is happening is that they're saying, well, we don't have enough money to afford 5 instructional designers, therefore we won't use instructional design. And that's it's not a good idea. So I think that coming up with instructional design processes and the way that instructional designers can, instead of working one-on-one with faculty, maybe work one-to-many, or help model, help people design a single module in their course so that they can then move on to design more on their own with just check-ins with instructional designers. There needs to be other models to empower faculty to work with instructional designers and to find the value in instructional designers.
Well, this sounds like a great pay-on to instructional designers and instructional design, and that's one that we support. And I'm absolutely delighted that that you're doing that work. But we are out of time, and I need to let you go back to whatever Monday means for you out there on the West Coast. Thank you so much.
Another meeting.
Well, that is the administrative world. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your thoughts. We really appreciate your perspective and all of your reflections. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for doing this work and for sharing this work with all of us. You know how much I appreciate that.